piece of research that I did back in early 2022. So it probably does need a little bit updating. But when I first put this together back in early 2022, it was actually in preparation for our programme revalidation here at the University of Hertfordshire. So we were revalidating our criminology and criminal justice programme, and we were thinking about the types of modules that we wanted to include in our new programme, and we were thinking about what kind of experiences our students really kind of expected when coming to study a criminology programme. So some of the kind of background to this piece of research, the data that I collected from who were our current students at the time, and then talk a little bit about how we've kind of implemented some new things as a result of this piece of research. So and I was asked to kind of take the lead on this piece of research and kind of putting together this paper because at the time I was doing a teaching qualification, and it was actually part of one of our modules on that teaching qualification that we were looking at sort of like the pedagogy and the learning styles, learning experiences of our students. So it all kind of fed in very nicely. So I chose this as my kind of main piece of research, my main topic for that teaching qualification, but it had a real world application in that it then informed quite a lot of what we did in our programme revalidation. So I was looking at experiential learning on undergraduate criminology degrees, and this idea of kind of skilling up our students in order to increase their employability at the end of their degree. So a bit of kind of background introduction. I'm sure I'm not saying anything new to anyone in the room, but traditionally criminology has been taught at higher education as more of a kind of theoretical discipline, rather than really kind of having much of a heavy focus on sort of practice or practical scenarios and things. It's always been a very sort of theoretical discipline. But increasingly we're seeing that we need to be more flexible, we need to keep up with current times, and we need to be kind of meeting students' expectations as well. There's so much focus now on what is this degree going to give me, what career am I going to have at the end. So we really need to make sure that our students have those kind of key skills so that they can then go into careers or just generally improve the employability rates at the end of the degree programme. But it's also in response to what our students are expecting from our programme, course fees going up, the cost of living going up. We really need to make sure that our programme that we're delivering feels very valuable to our student, that they're actually getting like good value for money, they're getting those key experiences that they're expecting, and it's not just a 3-year course of sitting in a room listening to someone talk at them. So it was really important for us to think about our student experience as well as what opportunities are they going to get at the end of their degree. So I started this project by sort of looking at sort of other research that's been done around criminology teaching, criminology learning. At the time, this was one of the most recent pieces of research, although I'm sure there's probably more out there now. But this was a kind of a key piece of research that kind of informed what we were looking at and kind of helped me to develop a short questionnaire for our students to kind of really capture some key information from them. But it was found that students chose to study criminology from kind of 3 main sort of perspectives. Firstly, that maybe they just had an existing interest. So maybe they were really into sort of watching true crime documentaries or into all those sort of serial killer stories. Some of them wanted to further their own understanding. Maybe they had specific experiences or exposures to crime, either as victims, witnesses, or being involved in crime themselves. Maybe they just wanted that further understanding, that further knowledge. And obviously those that had a desire to work in the criminal justice career, whether it's to go into policing, prison work, victim support work, etc. So this piece of qualitative research from 2021 kind of found these three main areas that students were reporting were reasons for choosing to study criminology at higher education. So there was quite a strong case for sort of looking not only to capture our own students' reasons for coming to study with us, but also thinking about, well, if this is what they are kind of aiming to achieve, or the reason for picking criminology in the first place, well, how can we kind of ensure that we're meeting their expectations and delivering them high quality experiences? And one of the ways that kind of picking up on the career element there more, this embedding more experiential learning opportunities into the degree programme itself. Just as a bit of kind of background to the criminology degree that we had in place at the time, there wasn't what we would have considered these experiential learning opportunities really kind of heavily embedded into our degree programme. There were opportunities for students to maybe go on field trips or sign up to a short co-curricular that we ran, which were a bit more practical. But in terms of the actual learning in the classroom, they weren't really kind of embedded, other than sort of, here's a scenario to work through, or here's a bit of a role play to do. And there wasn't really much in the way of kind of getting out into the field to get those real world experiences or have those additional opportunities. It wasn't embedded as part of the taught programme. They were all additional extras that students had to sign up for. Sometimes they were really limited in numbers, like in spaces. So sometimes students simply wanted to do it, but they didn't have the opportunity because there wasn't enough space. Or maybe they didn't have the time in their life to kind of fit that in. So we thought by really kind of looking to embed it in the programme, the offer was there for all of our students. It wasn't just a kind of a limited opportunity. So I talked a little bit about experiential learning theory, and this really this is probably more familiar within the fields of like teacher education, or nursing, medical professions. This idea of experiential learning is we're not only we're sort of developing our knowledge and understanding of a topic, or maybe a certain concept, and applying it to real life experience. So Yardley's kind of Yardley et al. Kind of put this into context and say that it's explored through curriculum design. Design's really the curriculum's designed in such a way that it focuses on providing these multiple different types of experiences for their learners, providing those opportunities for authentic workplaces. And then we see Kolb and Kolb kind of extending this and really putting together this this theory that can be applied in can be applied more in sort of educational settings on university degrees, and it can be they kind of argue that it can be applied to a variety of different degrees, not just those that we typically think of as being more practice led. My notes. So what we sorry. So yeah, so it kind of takes this sort of, it's an ongoing sort of cycle, and you deliver an experience, and it gives the students an opportunity to kind of reflect on that experience, think about what did that experience kind of achieve, what kind of skills, what kind of learning and knowledge were applied in that sort of scenario, and kind of acting on that. And the cycle kind of goes on and on and on. You can do multiple different sort of experiences, and the idea is that it is like this learning by doing, rather than sort of sitting in a classroom learning the theory. That's all well and good, but actually having the experience to put that into practice, understand the real world applicability of what they're learning, is kind of crucial. And This is really applicable in criminology because especially if students are coming to us and saying that they're looking to get a career as a detective, or they're looking to work in the prison service or as victim support workers, we really want to provide them those real world experiences so they can apply the knowledge and understanding that they're getting from the taught elements into and see how they transfer into the real world. So and again, like I said before, you can kind of see this happening anyway in those sort of more typical degrees that we think about as being sort of practice-led, like nursing or teaching. Students are often part of their program is that they will have a number of work placements that they go and apply the learning that they've completed. So in much the same way, we wanted to kind of think about, well, how could we apply this on a criminology degree, short of shipping our students out every few months to work with the prisons, work with the police, etc. And probably a bit more difficult to get those kind of regular work placements for our students. But what other opportunities that are along those kind of lines give that practical real world experience, so that students can sort of see the connection really between what they're learning in the classroom and how it might translate into a potential career at the end. There we go. Cool. So that was all sort of like the background really. So the project really that I kind of ran was I developed a questionnaire. It was just a short questionnaire, really loosely based off of that qualitative research that we looked at the start, where they had, I think they actually ran interviews and focus groups with students, criminology students, to try and better understand why they had picked to study criminology. So loosely based off of that research, just a short questionnaire for our current students at the time. We had quite a good response rate. I think we had almost 100 students across the 3 levels of our program at the time in 2022 completed this questionnaire. But there's kind of 2 main questions that I was really interested in, particularly when we were developing our new program, our program revalidation. And so the first main question that we asked was, why did you choose to study criminal justice and criminology? And there were multiple options they could pick. They could pick more than one option if they really wanted to. And there was the option to pick other, and then a follow-up question, which allowed them to type in what was the other reason. But you can see from this graph, the big blue section there, nearly 60% of the respondents indicated that they chose to study this course because they wanted to get a career within the criminal justice field. Now, ours is a criminology and criminal justice degree, and we do cover elements we do try to link it quite closely with career prospects. So we talk them through various different processes of the criminal justice system, various different kind of careers. Was already kind of embedded in our program, but it wasn't in a way that provided them those experiential learning opportunities on the program. So just this question alone really kind of told us that if 60% of our students are coming with a career prospect or a career path in mind, then it's almost our duty to ensure that we're providing those experiences, meeting their expectations of the degree, so that they can achieve the career that they've obviously come to us having that in mind. So that was kind of like the first question, and really kind of reinforced what I was finding already from previous studies, that a lot of students come study criminology with a career path in mind. Maybe not a specific career, maybe just, I know I want a career to do with criminal justice, but they don't really know what at that point. They're still really crucial as well, because we need to provide them all a variety of experiences so that they can almost have a taster and see what career they perhaps do fancy at the end. So that was question 1. Question 3, like I say, question 2 was just the follow-up if they clicked other and they could kind of fill in a more of a qualitative answer. But question 3, again, was kind of a follow-up to question 1. So this was an open box for them to fill in. What career did you have in mind when choosing to study criminal justice criminology degree? Again, some people might have written they didn't have anything in mind, maybe something in policing. You can kind of see, I used the word cloud feature when I was pulling off the data. You can see detective there in the middle. Quite a few people did put in detective as a potential career. So there's quite a range of careers on that image there. So you can see we're kind of dealing with quite a range of potential experiences that we could offer to our students. And obviously some of them are going to be picked up more, some might be more popular than others. But the idea was that if we could embed as many of these in the actual taught program, then we're not leaving it up to the students to kind of sign up for things, turn up outside of their teaching timetable, etc. It meant that everyone had an equal opportunity to experience a range of different things and really help to not only provide them with those experiential skills, but also to provide them with, I guess, better understanding of the career paths available to them. Like I said, a few of these were kind of based on, might have been a bit based on co-curriculars that we run. So we were running being a detective co-curricular, which was very practical. We have a member of staff who is an ex-Met police detective, and he was running it as a very practical, hands-on session, but it was a co-curricular, it was an additional extra, and it was always really popular, really limited spaces that we had available to our students. And there was a few other co-curriculars that we run in terms of forensic psychology, working with offenders, and things like that. So some of these might actually reflect what students had already experienced, but none of them actually kind of properly embedded in our taught program with those real sort of experiential opportunities. So what we kind of concluded at the end, so we were obviously capturing all this data, seeing what our students were saying, and the kind of conclusions from the data that we collected from the students, coupled with the sort of state of academia at the time and recruitment of students, etc., employability of our students. These conclusions were drawn, and this is really what kind of informed and influenced our program revalidation, creating new modules, embedding certain aspects into our taught program, was this idea that if students are actively choosing to study criminal justice and criminology as a way of securing a specific career at the end of their degree, then really as a university, as a program, we should really take responsibility in delivering on these expectations that our students hold. If we can kind of capture those expectations early on when they first join us at the university, then we can really be responsive, respond to the expectations that they hold. But we can kind of control that to a certain degree if we are proactive in embedding these experiences in the first place, rather than simply offering the experiences and the opportunities as additional extras. By embedding them, we're being very proactive and responsive to our students. And at the end of the day, it is about equipping them with these transferable skills for careers at the end once they graduate. So obviously, like I said at the start, this whole project, all this research, the data was all done back in 2022 because it did inform our program revalidation, which happened at the end of 2022. We are now coming up to 2 years on. We've just finished our first year on our new program, and we made a few kind of key changes. I'm currently actually cohort leader for the level 4s, so I'm really in a very privileged position to sort of see how this new program is kind of playing out. My poor students are constantly being bombarded by me, seeing me at the end of classes. They're getting feedback off of them. How did you find it? Did you enjoy it? So trying to capture as much as I sort of feedback from them as I can to see how we're doing, and constantly asking them what sort of experiences they would like as part of their program. But now what we have in first year, we have now have a dedicated 15 credit module in the first year, which is called criminal investigation. It has actually been developed out of our being a detective co-curricular, so it's now every student in the year group has this practical experience rather than having to sign up for an additional course. So everyone gets this experience now. It is also run by my colleague who is the ex-Met police detective. So he is very sort of hands-on, provides them with various different scenarios, and we've had them out around campus searching for murder weapons, interviewing witnesses and victims, and acting as a group of detectives. One of their assignments on that module was actually to pull together everything from this like practical scenario that he ran with them, and they had to then present as a group to say what evidence had they collected so far, what were the next steps in their investigation going to be, and he pulled in a few of his police mates to come and sit in their uniform as part of the panel. So I think the students really enjoyed that. Even though it was an assignment, it was still a very enjoyable experience for them, because they really immersed themselves in this whole, they were criminal investigators. So that's been a fantastic module. We've had amazing feedback on that, so that's really working well for us. And we do have a full-scale replica courtroom on our campus that we do have access to use. It is dominated by our law program, so I have been battling with our law colleagues all year and trying to book it as many times as I can for use on as many different modules as possible, so that our students again can see how maybe the evidence they collect at the crime scene, how that evidence is used in a courtroom, what is the purpose of the evidence, and I'm really kind of getting a feel for how a courtroom operates, the various different actors in that room. So we have quite a few scripts that we've written, fun little scripts that we can act out our role play in the actual courtroom. We have actually recently, up until now, we were just kind of taking over a classroom sometimes and setting it up as a crime scene for our students. But we have now actually secured a property on the university estate. We've commandeered one of the student accommodation flats to set up a permanent crime scene house, where our students can again fully immerse themselves in scenarios, develop practical skills. We're working closely with our IT, our computer tech school at the university to develop digital forensics as well. Digital forensics is very big in the world of policing and detective work, and it opens up a whole new range of career pathways for students. So we're working closely with them to develop a digital forensics element as well as the physical forensics and evidence. And we're just trying to build our repertoire of exciting field trip opportunities and guest speakers for students. We've done a few field trips to local prisons. I took some students into London to an art exhibition. I don't know if anyone's heard of Colster Arts, and they run a art program with prisons, and they do an art exhibition every year at South Bank. And all of the artwork is produced by people currently serving time in secure facilities. So just really thinking out of the box for different types of field trips as well, just again to give our students a range of different experiences. So yeah, I mean, it's still a work in progress. We're still seeing where we can kind of develop experiential learning opportunities for our students, and again asking our students specifically what do they want, what are their expectations of studying criminology in terms of what they want, with if they've got specific careers in mind, and trying to think, well, what could what experiences could we provide for them in order to kind of enhance their skills and making that bridge really between the taught stuff and how it applies in the real world. So yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell, really. Yeah, I'd love any kind of feedback or questions when we get to the Q&A part, because like I say, it's still a work in progress. We're still developing things, and we're still looking at ways of enhancing the program in this more sort of practice-led, experience-based kind of way. Not only does it enhance our skill set of our students, but it also potentially attracts new students. I don't know if anybody else's experiences, but I know across the board nationally, student recruitment is struggling slightly at university level. So we need to do everything we can to draw students in and make our program look enticing, exciting, and just providing a range of skills that are and experiences for students. But yeah, that's me done.
Okay, so welcome to our presentation. I'll introduce myself and then I'll hand over to my colleagues who've worked on this project with me. My name is Dr Sarah Waite and I'm a senior lecturer in criminology at Leeds Beckett University.
And I'm Dani Darley. I'm a lecturer in applied custodial leadership at Leeds Trinity University and also a final year PhD student at Sheffield University.
I'm on the Unlocked Graduates programme, so I'm doing my Masters with Leeds Trinity University at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk a little bit more about the demands and the difficulties with putting this together around students that work shifts. So I'm just going to start off by giving a bit of an introduction to what we're going to talk to you about today. I know that our position is fairly unique in that our student group are the only group like it across England and Wales, in that we have master's students working as frontline prison officers. So what we are hoping to do as well is really focus on the pedagogical aspect, particularly co-production, and hopefully give everybody a bit of an overview of how they can implement some of the practices, and then think about some of the challenges that might occur within their own student context. So we're going to start off by giving a bit of a background to the project. We'll talk about how we came to work together and give you a bit of a context about where the sort of project was drawn from. We're going to then talk to you a bit about co-producing with students. Dani in particular has done some wonderful co-production work on this project and in her PhD, so she's going to talk to you a bit more about that. We'll talk about the process of the project, so really how we worked together as a team, and then some of the difficulties that we had, and then some of the sort of more positive aspects as well. We'll talk to you then about the output, and that's basically what we designed as a result of the project, which was a audio training session, and then we're going to talk to you about some reflections as well. I can't see the chat either, so if anybody has sort of any comments or questions, just sort of pop them in and I'll have a look at the end. Just to start off by giving you a bit of a background to the project and how we came, how it came about, basically. As that we've already alluded to, we have quite a unique student group. Myself and Danica and our three co-producers came together through Leeds Trinity University, which is the university that delivers the Masters on the Unlocked Graduate Programme. So for those of you that don't know about the Unlocked Graduate Programme, it is a 2-year graduate leadership programme, and students on that are recruited by Unlocked, which are a charity, and then they work frontline as Band 3 prison officers across the prison estate for 2 years. Alongside that, they study a Masters, and at Leeds Trinity, that Masters is delivered where I worked, Dani works, and Lydia and our other co-producers are students. I've just left. But anyway, so they study the MSc in Applied Custodial Leadership. This particular project came about as part of a study that I did following my PhD research. So my background and area of interest is in criminal justice responses to women, and particularly within the women's prison estate. So my PhD research looked at staff prisoner relationships within the women's estate, and then I became fortunate to work on the Unlocked programme. And at the time I started work on the Unlocked programme, the cohort that joined were the first cohort to go through women's estate specific training. So that is extra training that's given to prison officers who are about to go and work in the women's estate. So I did a study on that and looked particularly at the professional development and the impact of women's estate specific training. Some of the findings are due to be released fairly shortly, but one of the outcomes of that were sort of gaps in practice that sort of students had not considered or didn't feel that they had the knowledge to be able to inform some of the decisions and the practice within that area. So then, Dani, do you want to sort of move on to talk about I suppose, just to sort of bridge that, we then started to look at as a team how we might overcome or plug some of those gaps and issues in training, which is where the idea from the menopause project came about. So consistently, everybody that was involved in the study identified menopause as an issue that had not occurred to them. They didn't know anything about. We had all were sort of fairly young. I say fairly young, all were young graduates, and this sort of women's health concept hadn't occurred to them. They had no knowledge of the issue. So that's when Dani and I started sort of talking about the idea of plugging that gap with some training.
Oh, thank you. So just a little bit about the kind of how the co-production element of the project came about. So like Sarah said, I'm using co-production as a methodology within my PhD research, which looks at the experiences of children who have been in care of child criminal exploitation. And as part of that project, I have had 3 young people who have been in the care system and criminally exploited, employed for a year as co-researchers on the project. So one of the things I'm really interested in doing is how we can kind of disrupt ideas of what knowledge is within the academy. And I think that we're kind of coming to a point now where that feels like quite zeitgeisty and important. And I think people are really interested in how we kind of understand knowledge formation to be more than just about people sitting in an institution and forming ideas of what is knowledge. And I think a kind of body of work that has run through everything that I've done is kind of using these ideas of people's various lived experiences and valuing them as part of a puzzle of how we form what knowledge is, and then from that how we then develop policy responses or initiatives. So that's what I'm trying to do with my PhD project. And I'd done a little bit of co-production with students at Sheffield while I was teaching there before I moved over to Leeds Trinity, where we'd kind of worked with some students who were coming to the end of their sociology and criminology programmes to think about give us feedback really on what it was that was good about the programme and not so good about the programme. So really similar to what Nicola was talking about before, kind of thinking about how we can use students' ideas about what they want to develop for programmes as a way of changing the programmes that we're running. And we'd done that in a way to kind of, because we realised that what was happening was that we were always getting the same students giving us feedback on things. And we were really interested in other students about how we reach students who wouldn't normally fill in their National Student Survey or their Tell Us forms, which is the kind of feedback that they have at Sheffield. And so we'd worked with some groups of students to speak to friends of theirs. So I had this kind of idea of co-production from a sort of student point of view in my head as well when Sarah and I were starting to have conversations about some of the findings of her West project that she'd done. And then I think I was also really interested, and again, similar to what Nicola was saying, I was starting off doing my PGCHE as well. So it was those ideas of pedagogy and how we sort of teach in ways that are effective were in the back of my mind as well. So I was really interested in thinking, how could we take the knowledge that the prison officers who had from working on the landings on a day-to-day basis in our women's prisons could develop their own ideas around training and teaching that they could then help us develop within our curriculum and teach to other students. And then similarly, at the same time as that, at LTU, we have a Centre for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. And one of the things that they're really kind of keen to do is develop excellence in learning and teaching. But one of the ways that they want to do that is to involve students as co-researchers on different projects. So there's kind of different projects been happening across the university over the last year where students have been doing bits of research on certain projects that academics have been running. But we were really interested in, could we kind of use that sort of infrastructure that had been set up within the university to do that, to look at how we could use some pedagogical co-production in order to fulfill some of the requirements or gaps that we were noticing that were coming out of the West study. Next slide, please, Sarah. I feel like Chris Whitty. So one of the things that I was interested in looking at then was kind of about this, almost what was the literature telling us about co-producing with students. And there's quite a kind of body of work been developing around this for a while now. Back in as early as sort of 2006, people were starting to realise within education environments and certainly within education courses in higher education, how this kind of pedagogical research can sort of look at, like it says in the slide here, embedding skills can be poorly engaged with, and the limitations of these top-down initiatives that we set up within our institutions, how we could work with students to improve those initiatives and make them feel more involved and developed in the work that they were getting taught or working with in the universities. And I think that one of the things within research now, we see co-production happening quite a lot, and there's kind of lots of reasons, and I've talked about some of them, about how we value people's different lived experiences being really important. But I think more and more people are starting to see the benefit of that, not just within research. Like, how can we take some of the learning that we've made within this, developing the field of co-production and research practice, and then employ that within our institutions? It seems to me that that's a bit of a logical extension. If we're developing those skills as researchers and reaching out to community groups and reaching out to perhaps marginalised groups, or in our case, working with people who have got working front line within the criminal justice system, how can we involve them in the developing of our pedagogical initiatives? And I quite like this quote here at the end here that says, co-creation promotes an open dialogue about meaningful best practices in learning and teaching while distributing power in the classroom and giving students more opportunities. And for me, the bit about the distribution of power within the classrooms is really important. I think that we've kind of seen that as co-production has gone some way to helping us to equalise power relationships and power dynamics within research. But we've not used it as a way of addressing that power disparity that we have in our classrooms. And we have an inherent power disparity within our classrooms where people are standing at the front of our lecture theatres and saying, we are the experts on this. But especially for us as people who were teaching Band 3 prison officers who were on the landings every day, there was a huge acknowledgement amongst the teaching team that they often knew more than we did about what it was that was happening on a day-to-day basis. I've never worked as a prison officer. I think there was only one member of our team at Leeds Trinity that at the time had worked as a serving prison officer. The rest of us had different kind of practice backgrounds and practice experiences. So it kind of made sense for us to think about how we could harness that knowledge of that experience that they were having on a day-to-day basis and use that knowledge to help us develop a response to the gap that we were seeing in the training that they were getting. Yeah, so that's co-production with students. Do you want to go on to your bit, Sarah? Oh, am I doing the next bit? I am,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's
Okay, so while we were kind of thinking about that, the Centre for Excellence in Learning and Teaching that I mentioned, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with these small internal pots of money that pop up in universities at certain times of the year when there's underspends. So the Centre for Excellence in Learning and Teaching had these small internal funds that they put out. And like I said, they wanted to use them to engage in participatory projects. And it was being used in lots of different ways across the university. So we decided that we were going to try and use it as a way of employing some of the prison officers who were students that we were working with to work on creating this project with us. And it was a really kind of small pot of money. So we had to be kind of quite creative in how we got to make the outcomes in the way that we have, and we'll come on to show you what we've done with it in a minute. But basically within that funding, we applied to employ brand three prison officers. So Lydia's here, and she had 2 colleagues who also work in the women's estate that worked on the project with us. So that's kind of the majority of the funding went to paying for that student expertise, and then for Sarah and I, not for Sarah and I's time, but for us, Sarah and I, to work with them on developing the outputs that we've come to push to develop together. And then so after that, we had to go through so these are some of the challenges maybe around doing some of that work fits within really the recruitment and the administration processes that were involved in that. And one of the really frustrating things for us, and I think it's a kind of wider lesson for us to learn about using co-production, both in research terms, but also if we're kind of wanting to develop this idea of working with students as co-researchers in pedagogical practice as well, like how, sorry, that's my dog barking in the background, wanting to develop how we work with students, and we need to think about our processes that the universities have in place for making sure that they're easy to negotiate. There certainly was. We had a limited amount of time and able to spend the money that we wanted to spend on the project, and we wanted to spend the majority of that time working with Lydia and our colleagues about what we wanted to create and how we wanted to develop that together. But actually, there was a huge part of that project at the beginning that was spent negotiating HR processes and admin and bureaucracy and recruitment. And for a university that had already kind of established this as a kind of priority for them, it was like there was the dots hadn't been connected. And I have to say that is similar to my experiences when I've tried to do co-production at other institutions as well. I don't think it's something that's specifically unique to Leeds Trinity. I think all of our institutions are it's quite a hard thing for them to do this stuff. So I think that that's one of the things that we would like to kind of take from this project is let's use it as a bit of an evidence to kind of push our institutions to kind of democratize their own processes and being less bureaucratic, because it definitely makes it harder to do, and it could put people off wanting to do it, and we know the benefits of doing it. So let's not kind of put barriers in the way to it in terms of the headache of admin and recruitment. I'll let you go on to the conceptualise bit, Sarah.
So once we had overcome those challenges with some of the administrative processes, we started to sort of work together practically on the project. So it was really important for us acknowledging the sort of power imbalances between the like student-teacher relationship. It was really important for us to work together at every stage and each aspect of the project. So we started off by having a couple of group meetings. We had them online because our co-producers were sort of based across the country, and we really started to sort of firstly scope out what it was that we wanted to achieve and produce for the training. So we had a couple of meetings. We decided or sort of pinpointed what it was that we needed to go off and research and find out about in order to make sure that this output, that what it was we produced was as fully informed as it could be. So we were quite lucky. We had Dr Kelly Lockwood and Dr Tony Woods from the University of Salford. They came and did a workshop for us. They've done a pilot project looking at women women in prison and female staff experiences of menopause. So they came and shared their findings with us in a workshop. We were also quite lucky in we sort of got to build links, I'll say, through Instagram with a GP who has a specialist menopause clinic. So a member of her team came to the workshop as well. So we tried to inform it with that sort of socio medical perspective. Obviously, it's sort of training for prison officers, so we needed to really balance the level of detail with the practice. So that was, in terms of the design, that was one of the challenges for thinking about where we pitched the information. But once we'd got the information together, we very much then worked as a team to sort of design the output and then pull it together, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Firstly, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit more about what went on to underpin the output. So obviously, I've just explained we had researchers and medical professionals deliver a workshop to really give the detail around the menopause as a women's health issue. And then we wanted to think about the pedagogical and the practice aspects of it and really drawing together here, I suppose, the knowledge that Dani and I had on sort of teaching practices, and then the understanding that our co-producers had on how that then translates into their role and how they learn as prison officers. So there is quite a fair bit of work, and I understand it's developing more around prison officer training. So it was really important to sort of understand what their role was about, so then we could design the training. And I think this goes back to what Nicola was saying earlier in understanding the needs of your student group. So it's about sort of drilling down on that, I suppose. So we recognised that actually the role of the prison officer, it's about making complex decisions, often really quickly under pressure, and they are underpinned by knowledge, skills and informed judgments. We also wanted to draw in some work that's been done within the Scottish prison officer, Scottish prison service on prison officer training that really talks about the importance of that effective domain. So it's not just about giving knowledge and skills, it's about developing attitudes and beliefs and values. So we really tried to balance that in the output that we designed. We also took some of the findings from the West project that I did, in that the nature of prison officer relationships with women is that essentially they're not medical professionals, they're there as a buffer and sort of support women as much as they can within the difficulties and structures of a prison. So we really wanted to use that to inform where we balanced you know, the sort of knowledge and perspectives and attitudes that we were trying to feed into this training. Lydia and our two other co-producers were absolutely fantastic at being able to nail down the tangibles and, you know, some of the small wins. So it wasn't, we weren't sort of going in as outsiders with these sort of idealistic visions for then prison officers to listen to the training and be like, well, that, you know, I can't manage that in the environment that I'm working in. So again, it's coming back to sort of knowing who you are designing your output for, your training for, your education for. We then had to think about some of the practicalities. So we had to think about the audience and where to pitch this knowledge. As I said earlier, we are quite lucky in that we are working alongside graduate prison officers within our role, so you can you know, give detailed information, critical analysis, etc. But we wanted it to be a resource that was used widely across the women's prison estate. So we wanted to pitch you know, the level of knowledge appropriately. we had to think about the structure and then how we designed the learning outcomes and the aim of the output, and really the accessibility too. So taking all that in mind, we came up with the idea that we would have a recorded audio output, because then it is easily shareable across women's prisons estates. Staff don't have to take lots of time out of their busy day to listen to it. They can pause it and come back, etc. So it was felt much more accessible and much more achievable to be able to share that resource and have the impact that we wanted it to have. So with that in mind, I'm just going to play you about a minute of the output. Hopefully I'm going to be able to switch over. Can everybody see? I can't see anybody. So if you can everybody see the video output?
Yeah, we can see it, Sarah.
Wonderful. Hopefully I've shared the sound as well. So I'm going to play it now, and if you can't hear the sound, just shout out.
I'm interested next in how you think you can use what you've learned around supporting the women that are in your care. What are the kind of practical elements that you can look at? How do you support them emotionally? And those are kind of structural things that we need to consider about how we support people better in prison with symptoms of the menopause and perimenopause.
Yeah, so if you're thinking quite holistically, I know we spoke earlier about how tight the structure of a prison can be in the regime. So as a prison officer, you're looking at things that we can actually try to practically do. So if you're looking at more of a holistical approach, then just being able to kind of be there and be empathetic and have conversations, listen to the people that are experiencing menopause. If someone's coming to you with a problem, which they will because you're their first point of contact, actually listen to what they're saying and try to understand, try to have some empathy. And if you have obviously a knowledge base, however basic, of menopause, you can actually kind of more actively engage in those conversations and offer some sort of practical support as well. Drawing some of the things we said earlier as well, patience is really key. Being able to recognise that actually, oh, this is unusual behaviour for that person, or oh, I'm noticing a change here. Being able to use your discretion. Maybe you're not going to give them some sort of negative behaviour warning that day because you recognise that that's related to their signs and symptoms, and actually maybe a conversation and a check-in with them would do a lot more than that more punitive approach.
What do you think the importance of this kind of...
There we go, right. Just bear with me a second and I'll switch back. Okay, so I'm just going to hand over to Lydia now. We're going to go through some of our reflections on the project.
Thank you, Sarah. So I wrote these just after we'd finished recording, and kind of some of my initial thoughts about how I had experienced co-producing something with my supervisors and how that felt for me. And I think what jumped out was that as a prison officer, you're very used to top-down initiatives and kind of being told you need to achieve certain things that maybe haven't been considered from your point of view. So this was really a breath of fresh air working on this project, and feeling like your opinion and your experience has value to other people's knowledge is really refreshing. I think you can forget that 2 years of working and making good decisions and bad ones has really informed my practice and actually would have value for other people's practice as well. So that was a really important part of the project for me. And yes, the other slide is kind of about the voices of people with lived experience. And I think when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about prison officers, but also women in prison themselves, because obviously a lot of the things we were bringing was from conversations we had had with women in prison. And I know that the workshop we did, that was from frontline research as well. So it really felt like the project was being informed by their voice rather than us making assumptions or decisions about what that experience was like for them. And so to me, that means that the output is hopefully going to be a lot more relevant and a lot more achievable for other prison officers. When they listen to it, they're not going to feel like it's not relatable to their experience and to what they've seen or heard women in prison talk about. So I'm really, I love watching it, and I'm really grateful to Sarah and Dani for giving us the opportunity to be part of this process with them.
Thanks, Lydia. Dani, do you want to run through some of these?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, Sarah and I just had a couple of reflections that we wanted to go through, and I think that one of the starting kind of around the positives there, and I think that what I took from this project is that I felt that the co-producers' elements of involvement allowed them to kind of really gain that deep learning. But also for me and Sarah, I think as well, like I've learned so much from this project. And I think that genuinely, I think it's not been a case of us sort of saying, this is it, and this is what we want you to learn. It has been a real kind of team effort. And I think for me, having kind of started teaching post-pandemic within universities, this sense of student engagement that I got from taking part in this project has been more than in any other project that I've worked with students, even teaching on the master's level all the time, where you kind of do see a kind of higher level of student engagement. The ability that we had to have that dialogue between us and genuinely feel like if one of us asked a question, we wouldn't be met with a sea of blank faces. People actually wanted to kind of be involved and respond because they felt they were invested in what it is that they were doing. I think for me has been the kind of real key reflection from the project. And I think that the other thing that I've taken from it is that we held each other accountable the whole way through the project. It wasn't like we were having to say to Lydia and the others, like, how have you done this? We felt we could do that, and they felt that they could say the same things to us. There was kind of genuinely this idea that it created a sense of a shared responsibility amongst the team altogether. And I think that that was really a kind of refreshing way to work in academia and work in teaching as well. I think that some of the challenges around it are that we are challenged by the institutionals and structures that the universities have kind of established. And, you know, over hundreds of years, we've had this very kind of traditional hierarchical way of teaching. And I think I still meet people when I kind of try and talk about the benefits of co-producing within research that don't understand that. So when you start to then talk about co-producing curricula and then engaging with students on kind of things like assessments and negotiation and things like that, there are people that kind of put up barriers towards that. But I think the more that we do this stuff, we can start to challenge that a little bit more. I think inevitably it does create a pressure on time. And I think that that's something that when you go into these types of projects, is just thinking about how much longer these things are going to take you to do than maybe more traditional ideas of designing a lecture and you do your PowerPoints yourself and then you stand up in front and then you kind of go through it. The kind of working together aspect does take a lot longer, but I think that the kind of benefits that I've described in terms of the engagement that you get and the sense of a sort of shared learning and responsibility that you have for each other definitely outweighs. But I think that we need to think about how our institutions get better at kind of finding the time to do that if we're going to then be able to have those positive outcomes that we were talking about.
I think for me as well, it was really important to be sort of reflective all the way through, and especially around those relational ethics. You know, the sort of relationship you're used to in that you've got student teacher. I think so this was my first co-production project, and I definitely went into it not really knowing. I suppose I was a bit challenged by my more traditional role, so I didn't really know where the balance was in terms of how much direction do I give, how much do I stand back. I was really quite conscious of not giving direction, but then in sometimes, especially when we have more experience and knowledge of the pedagogical aspect, it was definitely needed. And the key to that was the constant communication between the team, drawing on each other's expertise and then just sort of reaching out and sounding out when we felt we wanted more guidance, you know, from sort of either side or each perspective. Transparency throughout everything we did, and I think it really helped as well that we had a trusting relationship. You know, I'd worked together with this group for almost 2 years previously, so that sort of relationship really helped to build that as well. I think that's it in terms of our main points. If anybody wants to contact us to share any of the information further, or ask any questions, we're more than happy to. That's email addresses for myself and Danica, and then we've got references as well, which we can share.